Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for coming. We're just waiting for the rest of the table to arrive and to come back, which is about now. Okay, is Sarah coming?
Yeah,
Sarah?
just a second, Chair.
Okay. Well, I'll start on, but thank you all for coming, as I say. This will be the last of the select committees for CYP for this particular term. So I'd like you to thank all of the committee members for all their hard work and commitment, and especially to Hazel for her help and support during the last year. So thank you all for that. Just a few rules, one of which is please switch off your phones to make sure that they're off. And I'd like everybody to introduce themselves. This is for the purpose of being online, the online screening. So I will start, and then each one of you in turn, can you say your name and what position you are? So I'll start with saying I'm Penny Jones, and I'm Chair of Children and Young People Select Committee.
Good morning. I'm Peter Farley. I'm the County Councillor for Chepstow St Mary's Ward and the Vice Chair of this committee.
County Councillor Jeff Burrows, Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health.
Good morning, County Councillor Liz Hackett-Payne, Cabinet Member for Education and Learning.
I'm Bobby Jones. I'm from the Care and Social Services Inspectorate Wales, and I'll be making a presentation this morning.
My name's Anne Ferris, and I'm Area Manager in Care and Social Service Inspectorate for Wales, with responsibility for overall for Monmouthshire Children and Adult Services, and I will be making having a short discussion about a report today.
Good morning, Sarah McGuinness, Chief Officer for Children and Young People, Monmouthshire.
Hello, Simon Birch, Chief Officer for Social Care and Health.
Tracy Giles, Head of Children's Services.
Hi, I'm Keith Plough. Good morning. I'm a Community Councillor for Mega Withundi.
Good morning, County Councillor Roger Harris, Cresson Ward in Abergavenny.
County Councillor Maureen Powell for Castle Ward in Abergavenny, member of this committee.
Hello, I'm Debbie Blakeborough, County Councillor for the Trellick United area.
Good morning, County Councillor Peter Clark, member for Langibby.
Good morning, David Jones, County Councillor for the Criconi Ward to the north of Abergavenny.
Good morning, Anne Webb, Member for County Councillor, Member for Tintern and St Albans.
Morning, I'm Sarah Jones, County Councillor for the Llanover Ward. I'm not a member of this committee, but just attending as an observer.
Good morning, Mark Campion, Her Majesty's Inspector of Education and Training from Eston, and we're contributing an item this morning.
Good morning, Clive Phillips. I'm also from Eston, and we'll be presenting the findings of our monitoring visit.
Robert Tranter, Head of Legal Services and the Temporary Monitoring Officer at the moment. I'm here in attendance for the public forum bit. Thank you.
Nikki Wellington, Finance Manager for Children and Young People.
Sharon Randall-Smith, Head of Service for CYP, Achievement and Attainment.
Kath Sheen, 21st Century Schools Officer, Children and Young People Directorate.
Val Smith, here as an observer elected member.
Jill Cox, Service Manager from Children's Services.
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny Manager from Monmouthshire.
Sarah King, Democratic Services Officer.
Well, that was one of the longest introductions we've had, so welcome everybody. Sarah, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Councillor Guppy and Canon James.
Declarations of interest. I know that a few people have a declaration, so do you want to declare it now? Yes, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Definitely one declaration. I'm the member from the council on the fostering panel, and it's going to be a non-prejudicial interest. I'm also, for the second one, a member of two schools that were in the alliance at one time with Llanfair, Kilgethin, and it may or may not transpire that I need to declare an interest, so I'm doing it now as a non-prejudicial interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you. I am a governor of Derryview Primary School, which is also in the Alliance.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, may I declare on item 4 as a member of US governing body.
Councillor Jones.
And I'm a governor at Llanfihangel Criconi School, which was part of that alliance that was mentioned earlier.
Right, and I would like to declare an interest as a member of the adoption panel in case to do with the fostering report. Okay, and we'll sign the papers accordingly. Thank you. Now we'll go on to confirm and sign the following minutes. So can you please, we'll go through them page by page for accuracy, and if there are any matters arising you can state at the end. Right, the first one was the meeting for January the 27th, 2015. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. And page 8. Are there any matters arising? Then are you happy for me to adopt the minutes? Thank you. Should we go through the next minutes, which is the 12th of February, a special meeting that we had. So minutes page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Are there any matters arising? Are you quite happy for me to adopt? Thank you. Right, next item on the agenda is the Estin inspection letter. And this will be presented by Mr. Clive Phillips, who's the Assistant Director of Estin. And it's, as a result, it's feedback from the Estin monitoring visit on the 2nd to the 5th of March 2015. Oh, sorry. I haven't done the open forum. Yeah. I will do the open forum after this. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair, and good morning to you all. Thank you for the opportunity to feedback the findings of our monitoring visit, which we carried out in March. This is the first time we've attended this particular scrutiny committee in this capacity, but we do plan to engage more with scrutiny as part of our link work with the authority from now on. Since autumn 2014, we have reported the main findings from our monitoring visit directly to scrutiny in all authorities. And this is because we feel that you have a key role in monitoring and scrutinising how well the Council is responding to the outcomes of our inspection and monitoring work. Just to give you some background and the context to the March monitoring visit, we inspected Monmouthshire in the autumn of 2012, and the local authority's education services for children and young people at that time were judged to be unsatisfactory, and we identified 6 recommendations for the local authority to address. And after the publication of the report, Monmouthshire produced a post-inspection action plan in order to address the shortcomings.
Sorry, can I interrupt there? Because can everybody hear? Perhaps you'd like to put the microphone just a bit closer. All right, thank you.
Do you want me to go back over anything? Okay, sorry about that. Monmouthshire produced a post-inspection action plan in order to address the shortcomings we identified. And consequently, Estin and the local authority agreed on a broad monitoring plan to enable the local authority to demonstrate the progress against the recommendations over a period of 2 years. Our first visit was in February 2014, where we focused on the authority's safeguarding arrangements. And the outcome of the visit showed that although the authority had made some good initial progress in addressing the shortcomings around safeguarding, management information systems and reporting processes were not effective enough at that time. During the second monitoring visit, which took place in June, we found that the authority had demonstrated a significant change in its approach to addressing the shortcomings in general. There was a clear change in culture and realisation of where the authority was in respect of the improvements that they needed to do. We looked at their approach to self-evaluation and improvement planning, and we did find that there were measurable progress in those two areas as well. Although it was too early to judge the effectiveness of the authority's self-evaluation procedures and their planning procedures at that particular time. We visited then in March of this year with a focus on performance management. This is an opportunity for us to feed back to you the outcome of that particular monitoring visit, and I will ask my colleague Mark to give you an overview of what we found during that visit. I know you've had the letter prior to this meeting, so we'll focus on the main messages and some areas that you might need to focus on.
Thank you, Clive, and good morning again, everyone. I'm one of Eston's link inspectors to Monmouthshire local authority, so that's been the case for some time now. So I've seen the journey that the authority has been on, and I remain as one of the two link inspectors to the authority, and will be meeting with officers and members regularly in that role. The visit we carried out in March, we were on site at the same time as Wales Audit Office, who were carrying out a corporate performance assessment of the authority. The reason we did the work at the same time was we had a joint interest. We were looking at recommendation 6 from our report, which relates to performance management, and so there was a clear overlap in terms of common interest with Wales Audit Office in the wider work that they were carrying out. So some of the interviews we carried out jointly with Wales Audit Office, and we shared some of the information that we were gleaning from our respective interviews during that time, although they were still separate pieces of work. So our letter to you is an Eston letter, Wales Audit Office separately generating their assessment report of the authority. Recommendation 6 from our inspection was to ensure that performance management is effective and robust and allows elected members and senior officers to identify and address underperformance. There's a number of things wrapped up in there. Firstly, that there needs to be a performance management process in Monmouthshire that is effective and robust. And once you have that established, that then elected members and senior officers use the process to ensure that work in schools and beyond schools, because our local authority work with our work with local authorities isn't just about schools, it's about education services for children and young people. So we'd include, for example, the youth service. We would have an interest in young people up to the age of 25 who are not in education, employment or training, otherwise known as NEETs, and so on. So how that management information process and the information from it is used by members and officers to particularly to identify and address underperformance. As Clive has mentioned, there was significant underperformance in the authority in its schools and services at the time of the original inspection. So what did we find in March? Well, the authority has introduced a new corporate performance assessment process. That's not education specific, that's across the authority. And our view is that within the Children and Young People's Directorate, that this is being used effectively so far to improve performance management. So the Directorate is using it helpfully. The processes are being implemented. That includes staff performance management as well as performance management at the more strategic level. It will, of course, take some time have outcomes that are the result of improved performance management processes. So at this time, we can acknowledge a change in process, a change in approach. We can see that officers and members are using that approach helpfully. At the moment, it's too soon to describe an impact in terms of children and young people's outcomes, for example, in schools and so on. We were critical in the original inspection around the lack of connections between plans within the authority, from the highest level corporate plans through to the directorate plan for the Children and Young People's Directorate, and then individual service plans within that. What we see now is a much clearer thread in the planning process in the authority, from corporate plans through the directorate and into the work at more service and individual level. Sometimes plans are still not quite smart enough, so they don't necessarily, actions are not always specific enough, and it's not always clear enough what impact is expected as a result of those actions. But as I say, we can see a clear improvement in the planning process overall. In terms of the use of data, which is critical to performance management, our view at the moment is that officers and members are using data better. There's still areas for improvement around that, and in terms of your work as a scrutiny committee, these are things you might wish to focus on between now and when we carry out our final visit. We highlighted a couple of 2 or 3 areas in the letter in particular. There's an issue for schools around accessing data and information that they can then use that helps them monitor progress and track their progress and so on through the year. There are issues sometimes in individual managers' work, in their reports, in their analysis of data. So there's a lot of data there, but whether they use the data well enough to draw the right conclusions all the time and pull out the most important issues, there's still some further refinement and improvement that could be done there. And sometimes attention to detail is lacking in the way some managers at a service level work. So, for example, there's been improvements in attendance and work on attendance. And when you look at actually how the service is operating, they don't always look at some of the detail that's available to them. So you've got the data around, say, persistent absenteeism in schools. They are children who miss more than a day a week on average of school. They're classed as persistent absentees. And that kind of information isn't necessarily being used as well as it might be to help services to be as targeted as they could be and further improve the work. Okay. Attendance in schools in Monmouthshire is actually good, so it's not an area that we're critical of, but actually if services are going to continually improve, then they need to be seen to be being sharp on some of the detail that's available. That's just one example, and there are others as well. Of course, now in terms of improving schools and supporting schools, you have a regional service, a regional consortium, the Education Achievement Service, or EAS as it's known, that provides challenge and support to your schools. And our view is that you're working more effectively now with EAS in ensuring that they know your schools well, that they are challenging your schools appropriately on the areas that they need to improve, and that they are getting the right kind of support to those schools. So that's an improving picture. They're by no means where they need to be, but you know that, and you are challenging them quite rigorously and picking up on issues of performance appropriately with the Education Achievement Service there. And you are intervening as an authority on the back of the information that comes through that process. As a scrutiny committee, you've begun to call head teachers in to hold them directly to account for the performance of their school and for other issues within their schools. Our view would be that that's a very helpful thing to do, and I think head teachers were very positive actually about that interaction with you, and quite willing to be held to account and understand why you would be doing that. So we'll look at and see how that develops. It obviously takes a few meetings to some extent to get to a position of knowing how best to manage that process and how best to approach head teachers, the right questions to ask, and the way in which you then subsequently follow that up. So you've had some head teachers in now. When we come back on our final visit in the autumn, we'll be looking at how things have progressed since those early meetings you've had with head teachers. What impact did that have you've called them into scrutiny, you've asked them questions, so what? So that'll be an area of questioning in the autumn. So that's, I guess, a quick summary of the work that we carried out in March, and Clive and I are very happy to take questions from you. I think we've both mentioned that this process is coming towards its conclusion. So from Eston's perspective, our visit in the autumn term will be our final visit in terms of monitoring the authority's education services for children and young people. And at that point, we would have to make a decision about whether the authority has made enough progress overall in addressing the recommendations from the original report, and therefore whether the authority can be removed from its current category of being in special measures. So as Clive said, some of the early visits, not so encouraging signs of progress, but more latterly last June's visit and particularly this March visit, better signs of progress and improvement. There are some pointers in the letters that you've had from this March visit and previous ones that you need to look at carefully, because we will be revisiting all the recommendations in the autumn. And I would particularly mention the early visit, which was on safeguarding, and there were some particularly important matters there that will be looked at closely as part of the autumn visit. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. And Mark, I'm sorry I didn't introduce you. Mark Campion is a link inspector, as he said. So sorry, I didn't realise you were both giving the presentation. It was very useful and welcomed. And we appreciate the link with scrutiny. We appreciate that very much. So thank you for that. Has anybody any questions at this stage? Anybody? Right, Councillor Farley.
Thank you. Mark, if I could address you only because you were the last speaker on this, but I guess it might apply to Clive as well. I too would like to echo my appreciation of the ongoing engagement with scrutiny that we have had in this process with Estin. And I think other national organisations, regulators, could learn from Estin's practice in these matters. Looking ahead, assuming, as we all hope, that we do come out of special measures, does that mean that the link arrangement ceases, or does it continue in a slightly different way?
Yeah, that one's easily answered. We have 2 link inspectors for every authority in Wales, irrespective of our current status, if you like, of work with that authority. So whether they had follow-up beyond their inspection or not, every authority has 2 link inspectors, and they have exactly the same amount of time for every authority, because from our point of view, we want to have an ongoing relationship with the authority, a constructive working relationship, which is helpful to the authority and also allows us to keep tabs on the work of the authority, risks associated with that authority, key issues and priorities for education services and so on. At some point, we will be inspecting authorities again in another round. We've finished our current cycle of local authority inspections, and our work here is part of our final process of monitoring authorities from those original inspections. So that's where it will lead. But no, whatever happens in the autumn, our link arrangements will continue.
Thank you. Has anyone else got a question? Councillor Blakeborough.
Thanks. And I found that extremely useful. I think what has been good with working with Estin, you keep giving us concrete examples of what we need to do along the journey, because it has been a journey, and I think you said we've come an awful long way. There's been great progress, and I think you used the word significant progress in terms of culture and processes, but there's a few more things that we need to be aware of. So if we have a journey from 1 to 10 to complete the journey, to hopefully come out of special measures, how far along are we in that journey? And although you've summarised some of the areas we as scrutiny need to be aware of, could you perhaps summarise and say 3 points, 3 major areas we need to watch? So how far are we in that journey, and what are the, say, 3 points that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, I don't think we can quantify it in terms from 1 to 10. We will be coming to judgments on all the recommendations in our final visit in the autumn term. There has been progress in the recommendations that we have monitored so far, and we've left you with areas that you need to focus on a bit more. So So in terms of quantifying that at the moment, we're not in a position to do that. But I think the outcomes from your schools in the summer will be pretty crucial, because you did make some good progress during the last round of school assessments, school results, but that was from a fairly low starting point. So we will be looking at seeing that progress being maintained and consolidated during next year. So that will give us confidence that Monmouthshire is in a good position to proceed and go from strength to strength. The second part, you asked what three...
It's if you had to write an agenda for us in scrutiny and you put 3 things on that agenda as a result,
Okay.
what would you put on the agenda for us to look at?
What I would do is I would look at our monitoring letters, and this is the 3rd one. I would look at, if you like, the howevers we've got in those letters, and focus your questioning, focus your lines of inquiry, as it were, on scrutinising those particular areas, because those are the areas that we will be revisiting in our final visit in the autumn, and certainly we will be looking for concrete evidence that the authority has addressed those areas as well. Is that you? Okay.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. You've indicated that individual managers are not sometimes effectively using all the data that we have available to us. And I wonder if you're able to point us to an authority that actually very effectively uses that the data that they have, similar data, that we can actually learn from that. I haven't been a member of the committee for long enough to know if that's the case, but it would be useful if you could help us out on that one.
Yes, I think Monmouthshire have engaged with other authorities quite extensively in the last year and a half, and you have learnt from some good practice in other authorities. I think it's a matter of your officers being a bit... I think you know what you need to do. I think you need to do it with a greater attention to detail, and with more rigour, I think, more than learning more from other authorities. I think you know what you need to do. It's about doing it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Well, thank you both. Thank you, Ms. Phillips, Ms. Camby, very much. It was very interesting overview of the action taken since the initial inspection, and gives us all an understanding of what's going on. The progress is noted and welcomed, and likewise the points to focus on, the areas to focus on, have also been noted. So thank you very much for attending today.
Okay, thank you. Diolch.
Thank you. Next we will go to the public forum, and for this I think Mrs. Buchanan, are you coming down to speak, please? Right, this is a forum whereby a member of the public can speak for 15 minutes. If any matters arise that can be answered at the time, we will answer them. If not, they will be deferred until a later time. But I think Mrs. Buchanan will explain. So, Ms. Buchanan, if you could introduce yourself and you know, the subject matter. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak for 15 minutes. It is noted. My name is Sarah Buchanan, and I'm here as a parent representative of Llanfair Kilgeddon School. I'm not a governor, I'm not even linked to the PTFA, but I'm here as a mother whose children went to this school. Where do we start? I don't have all the pieces of the jigsaw, but my role really is going to demonstrate how much the community has been affected Some of this won't be easy for you to hear, but it's important to hear it. So, what's been going on in the community? On the last day of term, parents were told their children will be pulled with us to school. That decision was taken the evening before on a Thursday night and was agreed by the governors. The parents who weren't involved in that meeting, to hear that on a Friday, were obviously extremely shocked. And nobody then sort of understood what was going on. There was no communication. And a large body of parents felt that this was closure by the back door. It was the only conclusion we could see in the lack of any sort of talking within the governors, within the council. So a decision was taken to bring this out into the open, contact the media, use social media. So on day one of having the Save Llanfair Kilgeddon School Facebook page, 393 people. Is that better? So I was saying, on day one of the Save Llanfair Kilgeddon Facebook page, my aim was 100 likes. In fact, we had 393 people like that page within 24 hours. It was an astonishing reaction. The Change.org petition has logged 360 notices. These will one day, hopefully, for May, be submitted to the Town Council. There is a community petition going around, 146 signatures. So you can get a sense very quickly this has really affected the local community. And many people are in the dark about what's really going on and what really has happened. The Change.org petition headline is to categorically state that Llanfair Kilgeddon Primary School is not under threat of closure and that the children will return to the school as soon as a new head has been employed. I'm delighted to hear over the last few weeks that the intention to employ a new head has been agreed and is in writing. That has been excellent news. But to give you an idea of the concern this has caused, I'm going to read you 4 statements from the Change.org. 1, I'm signing because the local authority and Eston are destroying a brilliant small village school. As grandparents of 2 pupils, we can vouch for the unique excellence of this school. Do councillors and politicians serve us or themselves? This issue will prove it one way or the other. And finally, my niece went to this school and her cousins go there now. It is beyond appalling that this has happened in this fashion. So that, I hope, can demonstrate how everybody around Llanfair and further is feeling. So what can happen now? Thanks very much to local media support, the public support of our MP David Davis and Nick Ramsey, our AM. We would like to see clear communication and a structure put in place to recruit ahead, and actually, more importantly, to put in place that structure for a head to come into a secure, stable school. It is a unique school in Monmouthshire, and the fact that it has been sort of administratively bulldozed within 2 terms, there needs to be some accountability. We are lucky to have on the governing body a recruitment consultant who's also headhunted for many educational positions within the Welsh Government and education departments. Very rightly, he is of the opinion that you can't recruit for a head unless that structure is in place. So work needs to be done quickly and efficiently and transparently to put a structure in place. We would ask to hear from Stephen James whether he has an educational strategy for the VA schools under his care. We don't know. The other questions to ask are, when can we expect the job to be advertised on the eTeach government website? And to ensure at all points the communication, which has failed catastrophically up to this point, always happens between the governing body, the PTFA, parents like me, and yourselves. The reason why this has been such a serious problem is because the situation which has been caused now is that around the area and the parents, there is no trust left between us and you. And so there's a lot of repair work needing to be done. It's very much our intention to work with you as much as we can. But the damage is great and it needs to be resolved. It was, of course, a huge shock for the parents to hear that the children were going to be pulled with us. And it is only our desire that they are returned to Llanfair Kilgeddon in the educational format they know. Our school is an okay school, but it is a very different format. And some children are doing okay, and some children appear not to be. And at the front of all of our minds is return the children to the school they are used to and secure its long-term future, because it is a gem in Monmouthshire and it would be an awful shame if it were not going to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. Just stay there a minute. Sarah, would you like to reply? Sarah McGuinness, the Chief Officer for Education for Children and Young People.
Thank you, Sarah, for a very clear outline of how the community feels, and we do understand that completely. This is an emotive situation, and that's acknowledged. I can't answer your question directly around the diocesan strategy. That would be something that we can absolutely direct to Reverend James. In terms of job advert, I think we do need some clarity here that job adverts are the responsibility of a governing body. A governing body at Llanfair Kilgeddon is meeting this evening. I understand and I know that there will then be movement on plans for whatever the governing body decide. That is a governing body decision, but the local authority will support the governing body in achieving whatever it chooses that it wants to achieve as a result of an advert. Beyond that, I would just thank you for coming. It's not an easy thing to do to come to a council chamber, but your clarity is completely acknowledged. And I also want to thank you for saying that you want to work with us. I'm very glad that you want to work with us. When we receive news from any school, including Llanfair Kilgeddon, we act as quickly as we can. In these circumstances, we have received some resignations very late at the 11th hour. We have acted as soon as we possibly could, and we'll continue to support the governing body to achieve what I know you and other parents want. And let's hope that that is something that happens for you.
Okay. May I just reply?
Yes.
So just to have confirmation from this meeting today, a head will be appointed by September and the children will be able to return?
I couldn't possibly say whether a head will be appointed. If an advert goes out for a headship as a result of a governing body decision, then that's about who wishes to apply for that role. I'm certainly not going to be saying that any school will have an appointment by any date, any school in Monmouthshire. That is something now that will be part of a process.
Thank you. But you can confirm that closure of Llanfair Kilgeddon is not part of this process. It is the intention that the school remains.
At no point have we communicated that closure is part of any process, and I will repeat that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Yes, you'd like to go back. Thank you. Thank you for that. Right, next on the agenda, I may point out at this stage that the agenda has changed slightly. If you look at agenda item 6.1 will go ahead as normal, and then 6.3 will follow, which is the inspectorate report on the fostering inspection. And following that will be 6.2, which is Children's Services Development Report, where Tracy Giles will be able to talk about the two previous reports. The capital budget monitoring item is not going to be heard today. We have dealt with any issues that arose at the last meeting. They have been dealt with, and so it does not have to be heard. Thank you. So, if I'd like at this stage to call upon Bobby Jones, who's the lead inspector, and this report is from the November 2014 inspection, Members of the Select Committee have obviously seen this report and the reply that was sent by Children's Services. And we will discuss these obviously in more depth post-presentation. Thank you. If you'd like to all stay there, I don't mind, whichever you feel more comfortable with. All right. Thank you. Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry, would you like to? Yes, apparently it's been set up specially for you. So. Thank you. Right. Oh. Right. Unfortunately, I've been advised that unfortunately it does. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that.
No, the other way.
Is that better? They can see you now. All right. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, and first of all, thank you for inviting me this morning to talk to you about our inspection of the Children's Services in Monmouthshire County Council. As the Chair has already said, this inspection took place in November of last year. And what the first thing that I'd like to say is that in terms of the volume and extent of the inspection work that we undertook in Monmouthshire, it was an extensive inspection of children's services. It focused mainly on the work that's undertaken by social workers with children and families in Monmouthshire. And broadly, we looked at 4 themes. Excuse me. We looked at access arrangements. That is, how do children and families access the services that need to be provided for them. We looked at assessment arrangements. So once a child or a family is, if you like, over the front doorstep into a service, how effective are they assessed to be provided with services that will most appropriately meet their needs and protect and safeguard them. We then looked at arrangements for case management and review. So having undertaken an assessment and decided that a child or a family needed to be helped or protected, what arrangements were in place for making sure that that care planning was appropriate and met the needs of that family, and looked specifically for outcomes that improved the situation for that child or that family. Those 3 themes were our main focus. In addition to those 3 themes, we also looked at the arrangements, the leadership and governance arrangements that were in place in this council to underpin the delivery of those services. And at all times, I might not say this again, so I just want to stress at this point in the presentation that at all times our focus was on the outcomes for children and families and the extent to which the services that could be provided would improve those outcomes and safeguard children and families. So we did look at process, we did look at the timeliness of assessments being undertaken, for example, but our emphasis was on the quality of the interaction between the social workers and children and families, and the extent to which the quality of that interaction improved outcomes for those children and families. Our methodology was very much an interactive methodology. We looked at 44 cases of children and families, and this included interviews with 35 either social workers, senior practitioners or team managers. So for all 35 of those 44 cases, we undertook an extensive interview with a social worker who had some knowledge of the case that we were reviewing. So we didn't just rely on reading files. We actually questioned quite closely the staff who were involved in managing the cases. We also interviewed children and families. It's notoriously difficult as an inspectorate to engage with service users, but we did in fact manage to undertake 11 interviews with families, and we also undertook some direct observations of practice as well. 64 service users completed an online survey, I beg your pardon, 64 service users were asked to complete an online survey, and we did receive a very small response from 6 children and from 7 adults. We also looked at supervision records, complaints records, and we interviewed or carried out focus groups with senior managers, elected members, partnerships, and various social workers, senior practitioners and operational managers. So you can, I think you can appreciate the extent that we went to make sure that the evidence that we were collecting was rigorous and robust, and that, underpins, therefore, the findings that I'm about to speak to you about. So I'm going to speak to you in terms of the 4 themes that we looked at. And first of all, I'm going to talk about the arrangements for access. The arrangements for access for children and families did require some significant improvements. We found that the threshold between those children and families who might need to be given information, advice or guidance or signposted to another service, and those who needed a statutory intervention was not always clear and sufficiently rigorously maintained. Certainly, and I think it's important that you hear this, we did see that where there was an obvious indication that children or families needed to be safeguarded, those children and families were identified. So we didn't see any cases where a child or a family who needed immediate safeguarding action was left in an unsafe environment. Our concern was that we did see examples of children and families where their safeguarding need was less obvious, who potentially could have needed help and protection, were not helped fast enough. So some of those children and families were not progressed sufficiently rapidly to the assessment phase of their journey. Some of them experienced significant delays, and our major concern was around the fact that the systems and processes in place to manage those delays we didn't feel were sufficiently rigorous to ensure that some children and families who potentially could deteriorate in terms of their need for safeguarding were well enough embedded to make sure that some children and families didn't fall through the net. So the major improvement area here is in ensuring that those access arrangements become more rigorous. I would like to say that the picture does improve once we get into children and families who have been accepted as meeting the need for statutory social services. Once they're over the front doorstep, children and young people who were likely to be at risk of harm were identified and they were protected. And child protection inquiries were very thorough and very timely. So we were not concerned that children, once they were in the front door, were being left unprotected or not safeguarded. We did find that the quality of risk assessment was variable, and we would like to see some improvement in the risk assessment arrangements. and part of the reason for that is that we would like children and families to have a better understanding of what is the purpose of the help and protection that they're receiving. So we would like to see assessments and risk assessments in particular carried out more interactively with children and families to ensure that children and families fully appreciate and understand the subsequent interventions that they might describe as being as subjected to. In terms of care management and review, again, there is an improving picture here. So social workers working with children and young people were consistently helping and protecting those children, and they were doing that in collaboration with other partners such as health and education. Again, we found some improvement was required to the risk-based planning. We would have liked to have seen risk planning, risk more explicitly articulated in care planning, and in particular risk management strategies. We would like to have seen risk management strategies more explicitly articulated. Again, partly, not entirely, but partly to ensure that children and families actually understood what the purpose of some of the interventions were that were being carried out. I'm very pleased to report that we saw some extremely good quality direct work being undertaken with children and young people. And when I say we saw it, I actually mean that not only did we hear about it from social workers and their managers, but we actually saw it with our own eyes during some of the observational visits that we made. I'd like to say at this point as well that we found all of the social workers that we interviewed, without exception, very enthusiastic about their work, fully committed to improving outcomes for children and young people. And their morale, I think, was excellent. We took into account, if you like, that there had been a lack of stability in the social workforce over a period of a year or so before we came here, and that there had been significant commitment from you as elected members and from the corporate centre at Monmouthshire to improving the stability of the workforce. And at the time that we visited, a number of social workers had been recruited. Some of them were very new in post, so we had, with a caveat, say that the workforce is stable. We obviously need to see that stability is sustained, but it was certainly more than green shoots in terms of commitment and enthusiasm from that workforce, and clearly that is a significant benefit to this authority. So finally, our findings in relation to leadership and governance. Excuse me. There was some resonance here, I thought, with what we heard from Eston earlier this morning. Whilst the statutory arrangements that are in place here for the management of social services did meet statutory requirements, and corporate planning certainly recognised the need to safeguard children and families within the council, we found it difficult to see the thread from that corporate planning process through to the Children's Services department itself. And we felt that there was if you like, a disconnect in terms of that very high-level corporate planning and the extent to which service managers and social workers and team managers could be really clear about what their contribution to that plan was in terms of improving outcomes for children and families. We also found that in terms of performance management and use of management information, that whilst there was a good focus on quantitative performance indicator information, that not always did the story behind that performance management information effectively inform senior managers and elected members. We did see some good examples of qualitative story theme behind figures around some child protection audits, but we would like to see some of that good practice broadened out so that senior managers and elected members get a clearer picture of more broadly the quality of the work that's being undertaken with children and families within the council. So we found also that senior leaders weren't well cited on frontline practice, and I think that was not a message that was easy to hear for officials in this officials or elected members in this council. But we would like to see a greater connection between senior leaders and frontline practice. So what next? Well, the report has been published, as you're aware. The report was published in February. We made 10 recommendations in that report that were aimed at post-inspection development work. And in consistency with our approach, most of those recommendations were aimed at improving the frontline quality of services and interventions to be undertaken with children and families, and most of them were focused on the access and assessment arrangements in the authority. The authority has subsequently developed a children's services development plan to incorporate those recommendations and to tell us and themselves how they're going to achieve improvement. And certainly one of the messages that I would like senior management to hear about this development plan is that this must be a plan that works for you. This is not a plan that CSSIW is going to be implementing. It's a plan for the council to implement. So it's extremely important that the plan is focused on improving outcomes for children and families and not on improving processes. At this point in the inspection process, really my job is done. I led the inspection in children's services. I wrote the report. It's been published. I've received the improvement plan. I now kind of hand over to my colleague Anne Ferris, who is the area manager from CSSIW, whose responsibility is to engage with the authority. And it's through that engagement process that the plan will be monitored and improvements reported on. I don't think I have anything else to add, unless people have questions.
Can I just ask at this stage, have you got a presentation? Has one of you got a presentation? I've just been asked.
No, I don't have a presentation.
No? It
The
was just,
they were
waiting
distribute to, is that what you want it for? Sorry.
No, I think they thought you were going to do an IT presentation and they were just wondering whether you wanted it set up. That was all. That's fine.
Right. You could have seen the slides that I was talking to, and I'm very happy for them to be distributed with the minutes.
That's all right. That's fine. Sorry, did you say you were open to questions now?
Yes.
All right, I'd just like to say thank you for your overview of the report, of the written report, and we note the areas highlighted for improvement and those that areas of improvement. However, there are some areas of concern, I think, with the written report, which were highlighted in the reply from Children's Services and may be highlighted yet again in the questions that are about to be asked. Councillor Bakewell, would you like to start the questioning, please?
It's just a sort of an open question, really. And actually, your verbal presentation, I was more comforted by than the report, because the report is very negative. It doesn't show any areas clearly where we are doing well, and we are doing well in many areas. It didn't seem for me to show those areas with evidence what we could be doing differently. And therefore clear, concrete targets that we are working towards. It's a bit like playing a game of football. It's where are the goalposts, so we know where to shoot the ball through. And I couldn't get that in this report. Definitely from your presentation, that's a lot better. So do you feel that your written report provides a balanced analysis of the situation in Monmouthshire? Particularly one example is when you're talking about safeguarding children, and I noticed the word potential is used quite a lot. Kind of don't know what that means. So there's potential, but what does it look like when we've got there? And that didn't come across really. So from what you've said, in comparison to the report, do you believe the report is a balanced analysis of the situation in Monmouthshire?
I think one of the challenges, and I have to tell you that this is one of the most difficult reports inspection reports that I have written in quite a long career as an inspector. I think one of the challenges was the fact that there was so much that we saw that was showing potential for improvement. I'm sorry to use that word again, but it hadn't been sufficiently well embedded for us to be confident enough to find that we could say that something was being done well. So, I mean, and a good example of that would be in terms of continuity of social work provision to children and families. So what we saw looking backwards through case files was that there had been many, many changes of social workers for children and families. And children and families told us a lot about how difficult it had been for them to have so many changes of social worker. What we could see was that the workforce had significantly stabilised, but that was so recent that we didn't feel that we could, hand on heart, say, and now children will be seeing that consistency. The potential is there, providing that stability is sustained.
So just to kind of summarise, so I'm hearing you say that actually services of good quality, it is there, processes are there, but what you're saying is that you need there to be a demonstration of consistency, which can only happen over time.
I think that's broadly what I'm saying. Processes weren't there at the front door, but otherwise, yes, they were.
Perhaps at this stage I could just say perhaps that should have been made clearer in the report, that you felt that the processes were ongoing, but that you were unable at that stage to make a conclusion, because that would have given some more positivity to the report. Councillor Jones?
Yes. The discussion has partly answered the question, but I'll ask it as it was formulated anyway. There's generally a negative feel to the report, which has not been counterbalanced by the positive. When compared to national performance indicators around social care, On the whole, we are seeing a significant and sustained improvement. However, this does not appear to feature in your report. Could we have your response, please?
You could have a response. Performance indicators are clearly important statistical guides to whether or not a council is on a trajectory of improvement or stability or a downward trend. Clearly very important guides. But I think that they don't tell the story. And the report does attempt to tell the story. So if you look at your performance indicators around referrals and re-referrals, I think they look pretty good. They do look pretty good. What we saw at the front door were children and families who were being referred and who were then sort of falling into an hiatus between a referral and an assessment being undertaken of their needs. And some of those children and families potentially could have deteriorated. Their situations could have deteriorated during that period when they were neither being assessed and worked with or being told that they weren't going to be worked with. So there is a story there behind that particular performance indicator that does have a negative connotation, or which is not demonstrated in the figures themselves.
Thank you for the narrative that goes with it, really, and that was missing in the report. Thank you.
Do you, either of you want to reply, Simon or Tracy, at this stage, or would you rather wait till your report? Okay, okay. Yes, that's fine.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you give us an example of what you mean by senior management not being sufficiently cited on child protection work? What is your evidence for this so that we can carry out further scrutiny?
Well, excuse me, I'm sorry. I mean, there are a number of ways that I could respond to that. We found it quite shocking that the access the lack of quality around the access arrangements that we've just been talking about had deteriorated to the extent that they had without senior management being aware enough to take some action. It seemed to be surprising to some of the senior managers that we interviewed the extent to which the quality of some of the work that was being undertaken with children and families was not good enough.
Can I come back? What we're really asking for is evidence of this so that we can scrutinise it, not just sort of saying, well, it's not good enough. What actual evidence was that it wasn't good enough then?
Well, the fact that assessments, the quality of assessments, did not always take into account some even very basic personal characteristics of children and families. The fact that assessments didn't focus sufficiently on the extent to which children and families were at risk, that the risk to which these families were facing were not well articulated in assessments. Interestingly, when we talked to social workers could quite often articulate the risks very well, but that wasn't reflected in much of the documentation that we saw. Similarly with care plans, we saw care plans which included, very often included, appropriate objectives. We could see the link between the assessment and the care plan. But again, when we looked at how risk was going to be managed within that care plan, that was not at all clear. So we understood that children and families were going to have contact with social workers, and we saw some very good contact, as I've already mentioned, but we didn't always understand how their risks were going to be managed. So the quality of those assessments and care plans were variable at best.
Again,
Councillor Blakely, sorry.
just to kind of clarify that, because so what you're saying, it's just for us to scrutinise, to really know what we're looking at and what is missing. You're saying that there are risk management plans in place. When you're talking to a frontline social worker, they know what they're going to do. It's more the documentation of the risk
Sorry, no, I
assessment
didn't
plan.
actually say that. I said in terms of assessment, they could often articulate their assessment of risk very well. It wasn't documented well. In terms of their management of risk, which is a different thing, there was not social workers didn't articulate well how they were going to manage risk in terms of their documentation or their interviews. Risk management was I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because some of the social workers that we interviewed had a very clear understanding of how they would manage risk, and they could write it down and they could do it. But that risk management, the approach to risk management was very variable.
So consistency again.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've indicated that this is one of the most, for want of a better word, stringent reports that you've had to write in quite some time, and you've acknowledged that the potential that we have now is good, and you also acknowledge 3 or 4 times, at least in the report, that we have a new head of service that's been in for 9 months, and you obviously noticed that there's been a vast improvement in that time, and you've basically come up with 10 recommendations in view of the fact that potential is good, a new head of service. What sort of time frame are you going to put forward before we have another inspection, basically? And do you think that we should have another inspection basically as soon as possible?
I had a feeling that I might be asked that question or something along those lines. I don't think I said that it was the difficulty was about stringency. I think the challenge, yes, the challenge for me was that quite often where there was something positive to say, it was always in the potential rather than the here and now. So that was a huge challenge in terms of articulating that. We don't have any formal plans to re-inspect Monmouthshire Children's Services at this moment in time. I mean, as you will be aware, there are various actions that we can take at the end of an inspection period. One would be to say that we will be coming back very soon. We haven't said that on this occasion. I think the reason we haven't said that on this occasion is in part because, despite the tone of the report, much of what we saw reassured us that those children and families who needed to be protected once they had been accepted as such was thorough, timely, and we saw some good practice around that particular area. So around child protection, we saw some good practice, and we saw a lot of good interaction between social workers and children. So that was one of the reasons that we had enough reassurance around that. Another reason is that, as you will know, the area manager role in CSSIW is to engage regularly with senior managers in the authority, and also, where necessary, to undertake some short pieces of inspection work by way of site visits. And so I think I can understand why you would want a re-inspection at some point in the not too distant future, because you would want us to be able to say a lot of progress has been made. I think we have to provide you with an opportunity to make that progress, and Anne will be monitoring that with Simon and Tracy certainly over the next 12 months. We at CSSIW are in the process now of redesigning our local authority inspection framework. We're about to go out to consultation on whether or not we introduce a rolling programme of local authority inspection. Whatever we decide to do, I would see Monmouthshire fitting in to that programme of local authority inspection, and that certainly within the next 3 years we would be returning again to have another look, if not sooner, depending on the work that Anne does with Simon and Tracy, and you know, how we feel that work could be supported by another inspection, because what we don't want to get into is over-inspecting an authority, which is just detrimental to everybody, because all that happens is the authority is focused on the next inspection rather than doing what it needs to do to improve its services.
Thank you for that. I think I can take some encouragement from what you're saying, that although the report seems terribly bad, you don't feel it's that bad, that you know, we need a sort of Estin type intervention, and it's good to hear that you think you know, we have got potential, let's put it that way. Thank you.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the commentary and for the report, and I'd like to take a little bit of each as the basis for the question. In your report, and you wrote it so you'll remember, the end of the first paragraph of the introduction. In addition, inspectors evaluated what the local authority knew about how well it was performing and what difference it was making for the people who it was trying to help, protect and look after. In your commentary early on, you talked about the interactive methodology that was used. So my initial question is, can you describe in more detail what the interaction was as part of the methodology of engaging with the authority? Not the officers, not the staff, not the children, not the parents, but in this case, the elected members.
We interviewed elected members. I can't remember now whether there was at one or two occasions.
I come back to the point because I think it's a fundamental one, particularly as only the other week your chief executive in a national conference in Landrindod, Wales, was talking about engagement in scrutiny. For example, how many members of this committee were interviewed?
I think it was 2.
Ah, right. And of other members not part of this committee?
We will have asked the authority to put together a focus group for us of elected members, and we will interview the members that arrive on the day. We don't stipulate which members we want to interview.
Can I just point out that I was interviewed with Councillor Burrows about, but as a select chair, not as a member. No other member of this committee was. interviewed?
I can't account for how the invitation was made to the members.
No, of course not. But I would offer as a marker for the future, and perhaps a marker for the way our link inspector works with us. Estin, I think, have developed good practice in this area. They actually do engage with members, and I think, you know, you might want to build on that a bit. But you know, I accept what you've said about the inspection that was done. I still would question whether you actually got very much of an insight into what elected members know and think.
Can I just ask Tracy, would you like to come in at this point, and then you, Councillor Blakeman?
Yeah, just to clarify, and I checked with my colleague Jill Cox, we were asked to provide the chair of CYP and the leader for children's services, and that was why we asked you, Councillor Jones and Councillor Burrows, as part of those inspection interviews.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer, and thank you, Tracy, for the intervention there.
Councillor Blakeman.
Just going along the lines of scrutiny, I just wondered, did you have the opportunity to perhaps go through some of the scrutiny committee minutes, because that provides evidence of our involvement and scrutiny?
Yes, we did see, I think it was the last quarter, I can't remember exactly, but we did see some reports that had come to scrutiny and minutes from meetings. We didn't use that information as evidence in the report, but we did use it to contextualise some of our thinking.
I mean, it's already been said, but definitely I think we absolutely value an arrangement, a partnership with inspectors and us as members to scrutinise in order to get, you know, high quality within Monmouthshire. Just once again, kind of summarising in my head, so you're saying that we are actually moving in the right direction. It's not all doom and gloom. That on the whole, you're saying that Monmouthshire County Council provides good quality services, the processes are there, but actually we need to evidence consistency. And the final question for me is just how assured are you that the Children's Service Development Plan actually meets with the recommendations that you've set out?
I'm not sure whether Anne has had an opportunity yet to talk to Tracy about my comments. I have commented on the plan. I think broadly it does speak pretty well to the recommendations that were made. I did make a few comments where I thought it could be strengthened. One of those areas was around risk management. So whether or not Tracy will have had an opportunity to sort of respond to that with Anne to my comments, I don't know.
I think I just must note at this stage that this was a report in November 2014, and 6 months have passed since then. So, you know, we wonder why it has taken so long to give feedback. But we can bring that in at a later stage.
This was the date on which I was invited.
Has anybody got... Mr. Cloud, did you want to speak?
Generally, it's a report on a service, and ultimately the service has customers, and the customers in this case are really the parents and the children. And you know, throughout this report I read speedy service, staff wonderful, much respect and admiration, very impressed, spoke positively, and I could understand everything that but then I read burdensome, I read inspection, I read confrontational, and to me I think you probably did quite a good report, but it was the way it was presented. It's very easy to become confrontational because we live in that society, and it's very good to select the wording that you use more correctly, because you can achieve the end result, but probably accommodating all the people involved rather than causing, even if it's only a little confrontation. And it tends to switch people off, and it tends to dilute the amount of effort they can actually put into the situation to correct it, which is really what your report is all about. That's really all I'd like to say, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I suppose I could add here that, yeah, it also feeds the press, doesn't it? And we get poor press as a result, poor headlines as seen very recently. Right, has anybody any more questions? Tracy or Simon, do you want to sum up now, or do you want to come back later?
I'll just say a couple of words. One of these is broken, so I'll just move over to Tracy here. I won't say much, but I know Tracy will have some specifics she wants to pick on. I mean, from a Chief Officer, Director of Social Services point of view, I mean, the first thing the place we have to start is where, in fairness, Bobby did start, which is to be absolutely clear that in terms of child protection and the people and young people potentially at high risk, that you came in, you had an extremely thorough, the most thorough look I've ever known, over 40 plus cases, and concluded that that was secure. And so I think all of our conversations have to come back to that, because if you weren't saying that, we would be having a very, very different conversation around this table. So let's be absolutely clear about that. I think that it was a methodology that was a constructive one. I think the engagement of speaking to staff and so on was very positive. I think it's played out today here a bit that what has happened is that, having followed up from a previous inspection where you weren't satisfied just a few months before, we've got a bit stuck in this issue about are you assessing us at a point in time, or are you talking about potentiality, or are you looking backwards? And I think the report has not been well served by that, because it felt a bit from this conversation, how could we win really? If you found something that was good, you said, it's good, but they're not be doing it for long enough. If you found something that was bad, you said, well, it's not good enough yet. So I think that perhaps has played out some of that and wasn't terribly helpful. Our response and focus now, of course, is how we move forward. We've got a good plan going forward. Very helpfully, Anne has agreed with us that that plan is not a standalone plan for CSSW. It is embedded in what we do as an authority, which is very important. And just to be clear, this has been touched on, we now, in my opinion, have a standard relationship with CSSW, as do any other parts of Wales. There's not an inspection around the corner, because actually, although this report might not have articulated all of it, this is a service that is on an improvement, a strong sense of improvement, and is meeting its basic statutory functions. There is some learning for us there. I think the information about risk assessments is something that we're already heavily engaged in improving, and we wouldn't have been suggesting that we had got where we wanted to yet. And so I think a recommendation of that nature is very helpful. And finally, from me, I do think that the report has overstated some findings, as has been implied by some of the other questions. I do think, and I've taken this up at various levels with CSRW, that the issue of evidence, Bobby, there are areas in which you've said things that I don't think are robust in terms of the evidence. And in some cases, we've come back and asked for that underpinning evidence and not yet seen it. So I think some of the questions today, which I think were perhaps hinting at that, was, can we really understand when quite a serious comment is made? Let's see that, and let's be assured that we are dealing with the key issues. So my overall view is that I'm very pleased with the report that states that this is a safe service and a service that is clearly on a trajectory of improvement. I think issues around evidence and clarity are problematic to me as a director, but as we sit here today, our focus is on moving forward to get where we want to get with our service.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come back on that, or you?
I think Simon and I have already had the conversation. There's nothing I would want to add from our previous conversation.
All right, then. Everybody quite satisfied? All questions have been asked. Councillor Blakeborough. Oh, Tracy, you want to come back? Sorry.
Really, I just wanted to remind members that Children's Services have had 2 inspections in an extremely short space of time. And I've been sat in front of you, it's a year now since I've taken up this post permanently in Monmouthshire, and I've been sat in front of you on quite a number of occasions within that year to explain the things that have been going on and the challenges that we've been facing across the service. So mindful of this report and previous reports, and also the impact on my service of having these inspections. And, you know, I've got Jill and Debbie here today who have been fundamental, really, in progressing the staff. You know, the staff themselves, Jill and Debbie, have been doing training over a very short period of time, which you can, you know, we all know we can go to training, but does it change how we practice? And that's what we're working on now going forward. The training has been in place. We've done a lot of work around play therapy. We've done a lot of work around risk management. We've done some work around case recording. But you can't expect social workers to change everything between April and November of last year. We have to take a reasonable, responsible approach, not take knee-jerk reactions, to sustain the staff group. As you all know, they've had quite a rough time. It's been very busy in the service, not any busier than it is anywhere else in Wales, to be fair. It's just, it is busy. We're seeing very complex cases. We've seen abuse that a lot of staff have not experienced as practitioners before, and we're having to support those staff. So we've done some more work around TRIM training, which is trauma risk management, to support them within that work, because otherwise social workers just kind of hold on to that because they say it is part of their day job. So alongside this inspection, we have actually been delivering services to children and young people, and we have been supporting our staff to learn and develop, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. It's very helpful. Do you,
Just again, finally, and I think that is important, because I think anybody reading this report separately would not come away with the feeling I have, which is it is a safe service with a good practice plan to continue to improve, which everybody should be doing. That's how I'm seeing through the recommendations, which are helpful as guidance. Just final question, really. We're talking about staff, and some have been new and they're settling in. From your experience, do you think there's enough staff to do the job?
I couldn't answer that question. I'm not sufficiently well in tune with the detail of the operation of this council to say that.
Right, I think I'm just going to sum up now. So thank you very much. Thank you for the report and for everything you've done. The Select Committee definitely are in agreement that this written report appeared to be quite negative and lacked evidence and perhaps sound analysis in places, but that the verbal report seems much more positive, which gives us an overall reassurance. We understand the impact it had on the service, the inspection had on the service. And at this junction, I think we should point out that since Tracy Gels became head of Children's Services, that she and her staff have made significant and much-needed improvements, which are ongoing. And, you know, we will be scrutinising them as and when. We should also congratulate her and her staff on the recent awards that they've received and acknowledge their hard work and commitment, which, you know, we do. As I say, following the backup Peter Farley's, Councillor Farley's comments, following recent meetings, conferences and seminars that we've attended with various regulatory bodies, we feel that as a select committee we were not consulted enough about this inspection, and then we were held to account for the depth of scrutiny and the challenge provided, and the two don't tally. We request that in future we meet with regulators prior to the inspection, and this has been mentioned earlier on, and I hope that this is what will occur. This would be much appreciated for all of us. We'd like to work in partnership and move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, the next report will be, I think, Anne, are you going to do it? Yep. Anne Ferris is Link Officer. Sorry, Anne Ferris is Link Officer, CSSIW. And the report is on the fostering inspection, which was October and November 2014.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that introduction. In fact, I think you were probably inspected 3 times in the last 12 months. The inspection, the fostering inspection report, is an annual inspection that takes place, and we decided this year that we would run it in parallel with the overall inspection of children's services, and I think that was probably the right. That was the right decision in order to get a full view and an overall view of children's services as a whole. of which fostering is an important part. You will have, the reason that I didn't do a presentation was because you will have had an opportunity to have a look at the report, I'm sure. So I just wanted to go through some of the findings from that. And I'm aware of time as well, so I'm not quite sure how much time I have, really, Chair.
No, it's fine.
Is that okay? Great.
Fine.
Great. Just very much as very brief background, we do inspect fostering services on an annual basis. And as I said, this ran in parallel with the other wider inspection. Last year we undertook a focused inspection, which was very short and sharp, and was just looking at the quality of services for people who receive the services. This year we decided that we would do a baseline inspection, and that obviously incorporated was far more detailed, because it looked at the 4 themes that we look at in terms of inspection overall, and that was quality of life, staffing, leadership and management, and foster carers. So much more detailed. In terms of how the inspection was carried out, in compiling the report, the inspector, one of my regulatory inspectors, came and spent about 4 days on and off with the team, and information was taken from the foster panel which she attended. She talked with panel members, spoke with foster carers at the Foster Care for Foster Care Association meeting, spoke to 3 members of staff, spoke to the manager, had a look at a number of the electronic files, statement of purpose, etc., and then pulled all of that information and evidence together to triangulate it into what I see as overall being a positive report. We didn't identify any areas of compliance for this year, nor indeed did we last year, but you would expect as an inspector there are always areas for development, and you would want to know what those are as well anyway. In terms of what the service does well, certainly what we found was that it was a very experienced group of staff, a staff team who had a very good understanding of children's issues, because had worked in other parts of children's services, so they just hadn't come into the fostering team, and that's really important. And I think one of the issues that we talked about earlier this morning somebody referred to was the complexity of children at the moment. If you're looking at fostering 10 years ago, it was a very, very different scenario than it is currently. Children with very complex needs, and you need to have a really good understanding of those complex issues that children and families are facing currently, and that was there. There are mechanisms in place through the Foster Care for Foster Care group to involve people in bringing their views forward, in having discussions about how things could move forward in a more proactive way, in offering their experiences, and in being involved in things like the recruitment of staff and the whole induction process, and that has happened. And I think the fact that one of the things about Monmouthshire is the fact that the support group is funded. That says a lot, I think, to foster carers about how they're valued, and they have the opportunity to use that group and that forum to engage in things like and develop policy, as well as with senior managers. And I suppose alongside that comes the issue about when you do give people that opportunity, they are going to say, and they're going to be challenging and say what they think. And you expect that as well. I mean, that just goes with the territory, doesn't it? In terms of overall improvements since last inspection, the inspector has said very good progress has been made, particularly in relation to things like improved assessment reports. So much clearer about what the focus should be, what the needs of children are, and that obviously then makes it easier. It makes it easier to do those links and to do that matching and to make sure that the outcomes are better for children. Much tighter around information, still something to be done and on a journey in terms of sharing information and communicating, but that has improved. Sharing information with foster carers, that was the feedback that they gave us. More robust procedures in terms of processes, remind us about things like DBSs when they expire, and that's obviously extremely important. As I said, no compliance, but always room for improvement and refinements, really, as the project goes on, the service goes on. There are some areas which will be quickly rectified. Some of them are administrative processes, which sometimes are slow. There's a need for a training strategy for foster carers, or maybe there is a training strategy for foster carers and it's a need to be able to communicate that better in a way in which people understand. And sometimes I think when, as professionals, I think sometimes when we're dealing on an everyday basis with what we see as our bread and butter, sometimes we have to churn out things maybe more often than we think we ought to. Maybe we think that people understand what we're saying, but the interpretation is different. So it's about sort of churning out sometimes the same message about this training is in relation to this particular aspect, those sorts of things. So things that can be easily remedied, really. Okay, so in terms of quality of life, the report talks about children experiencing warmth, attachment and belonging because they're cared for by foster parents who are committed into an integrated, and it's very much an integrated system. The inspector was saying to me that she felt she had attended the foster care meeting, and a number of preschool children were at that meeting as well. And she was saying you could very clearly see that it wasn't just a job. People didn't see that it was just, I'm doing a job in Monmouthshire. It very much shone through the fact that they wanted to do a good job, that this was something that they were very, very proud of, the achievements that they had made. The inspector said that she felt that, that it felt a very comfortable situation, that meeting felt very comfortable, where people felt very open and were happy to discuss. You could clearly see how there was good interaction between the foster carers themselves as a group, and also foster carers and the children. That interaction was very positive. There were mixed views about from the foster parents overall about things like the quality of information they had about children. Some people said described as being very good. Some people said that the experiences were less positive. The one thing that they did say, though, carers did say that they were always consulted about possible placements, particularly if they were outside maybe that area of expertise or wider group in terms of age group, that they felt that the authority came, spoke to them, talked to get that matching right. Some carers described their experience with social workers as being brilliant, and some described it as being very poor. There was a mixture in that. Generally, in terms of one of the criticisms was around poor communication, and that came across. And it was something when the inspector spoke to the manager of the team, who actually recognised and acknowledged that could be better, and has in fact improved. She could see where there were improvements, where there were improvements beginning to take place. And there are examples of this in the report about things like short notice of meetings, people not being communicated appropriately with, a failure or slowness in terms of responding to telephone messages and call back. And again, I think some of those things, people get very frustrated by those aspects, which in themselves are very small, but have a huge impact on people if you're actually sitting waiting on the social worker to get back to you about a decision or whatever it might be, or a concern that you have. It's important, and I think that's an area that the authority will want to look at and are looking at. And as I said, that was acknowledged by the manager. Foster carers felt in particular that, and you'll notice I'm talking to foster carers a lot of the time, and that's because there were 12 foster carers at that panel meeting, which makes up about 25%, I think, of your total foster carers. And in some respect, that's a fairly big group that we would be getting comments from. And it's important, even if some things are just their perception of things that can be better, they're absolutely real to them, and I think it's really important to make that point. Foster carers talked about the importance of the appointment of the contact coordinator, and I think they'd probably been in post for a fairly short time before the inspection, but that so far so good, I think, was the message on that. The new post that was developed was making positive impact. People felt that some of the issues and some of the comments that they had in terms of getting access to people was going to be much improved because of this. From social work perspective, they felt that they made a positive contribution to children's reviews. They promoted timely permanency planning. They felt safer, that there was an increased focus on things like permanency planning, and that gave them greater security about the decisions that they were actually making. I think that's a very important point, that they felt safe when they were doing their work, and that's clearly hugely important. The manager talked to the inspector about developing a children's panel to influence the strategic direction of the service. I've not caught up with Tracy, I have to say, yet on where we are with that. But that is a positive and good innovation. Sorry. The next area was quality of staffing. And again, I've mentioned about the fact about staff being about the qualifications, and this to me gives the authority an air of confidence in terms of decision making. If you've got people who are well qualified, who are experienced, you can make assumptions that the decisions that they're making, that you have confidence in those, and as managers and members, you need to have that confidence. I think it was acknowledged that it's been a difficult year because there had been high level of staff absences. There had been, I think, people off sick, and because it's such a small team, that obviously has an impact. So it certainly hasn't been without its challenges. 3 of the staff that we spoke to spoke about the work that they do with enthusiasm. They're very enthusiastic about the work that they do. They were very happy with the agile working arrangements. They felt that the flexibility that they had was very important. The nature of the work that they do was very important, that they could be flexible and respond to need. But they felt that there was a good oversight in terms of the managers of the service, where meetings were held twice a month, and there were opportunities to develop practice issues, develop their practice as well as issues that they raised at those meetings. So they certainly felt that they were well supported in that. They told us that they had regular supervision on a monthly basis, and that managers were described as staff as being available and approachable. And again, I think if when you're working, you need to be supported in that. But I think where there's agile working, that additional access and instant access to people is hugely important if you're out on the road and on your own. Quality of leadership and management. Some people talked about the fact that moving an office had been good. It had improved their environment. Foster carers told us about that they felt that they experienced an improving service, and that was corroborated by staff who were saying that they felt that core processes were in place and that they were good in relation to fostering services. Reviews were up to date. All examples of the reviews that we looked at were very good in terms of the quality. I mean, we looked at the inspector looked at a small sample, but the ones that she looked at were positive. We have, as part, one of the regulations talks about having a review of the quality of service, and that had to be undertaken. We expect that to be undertaken on an annual basis, and part and parcel of that would be about consultation and about consulting with your staff and with your parents and those who access services. And I think that was one of the areas that we felt needed a bit more refinement. We need to get more of that. Rather, you need to get more of that to be able to look at in the round how a service is and how that can change and develop. And again, it's about consulting. It's about hearing what people say, and then it's about evidence for them about how, in fact, you square the circle, really, in terms of, we've heard what you said, this is what we're going to do, and they've got evidence of that. Very well established foster panel. Applicants, foster carers invited to attend panel. The assessment, the way in which it says it's a very formal process, which says to me about the robustness of it and about the importance of being able to demonstrate that the whole process is thorough, and that was evident in this instance. And again, I think that again, because of the complexities and because of the whole safeguarding issues that we were talking about, it's just very, very important that in fact those processes are thorough, and that's how we would expect them to One of the things that the inspector did raise as well was about the training for members, again the ongoing training, and in terms of their skills development, about the complexities of fostering and the needs of children, and that being ongoing in terms of learning. It's as important for members as it is for everybody else, really. Lastly, quality of foster carers. That was a mixture of positives and negatives. And that's reflected in the report, I think. And I guess in some ways it isn't surprising when you're talking about being in a sort of a management of change phase, in terms of you've got your, and I can't remember what it's called, your skills development. Somebody remind me.
Payment for school.
that exact thing. Finance is always it's always a big issue, isn't it? I mean, certainly it came through, and I think it's come through in the report that the carers, some carers were on a very different place in that journey, really. I think that there were a number of carers who absolutely welcomed it. I think that there were some carers who were saying, well, I've done this for the last 20 years, and what can you teach me about, about foster care? What do I not know about? Some people make those, I think, sometimes use those opportunities as a time to reflect maybe and think, well, actually this isn't for me anymore, or it's all got too complicated and I'm not interested in doing any further development. But we need to move with the times, and certainly it's I suspect there are some challenges, but I think it's just hugely important that you continue that programme as you are doing. Foster carers, some foster carers told us that they felt that there was a delay in things that were really important to them. Things like if there was something was going to be presented to panel and it was delayed, or there was a reason that it hadn't happened, they felt frustrated that they didn't know that. And sometimes it's just saying, it's because you automatically think it's something, maybe is it something about me? Have they found out something? People get very concerned, and it's a very, very anxious time, I think, sometimes for foster carers. Somebody described a situation where they had been approved. They were told they had been approved, but they didn't have the piece of paper for something like 6 months. And they were saying, it's just really important that I have this piece of paper to say that I'm an approved foster carer. So there's some minor things like that I think are really, really very easily remedied. And it's just really about, I suppose, if we were in that situation and we were a foster carer, yes, you need to know that. You need to know that everything's okay. People spoke very positively about the support networks between foster carers, and that particularly which your foster care meeting provides for them. Some carers said to us that they had extremely good relationships with their social workers, that they were able to answer all the questions and queries they had and alleviate any fears that they had or any anxieties that they had. Somebody said to us, but if the support worker or whoever doesn't know the answer, they might say, well, why don't you email my team manager, rather than I will go and I will find out the answer and I will get back to you about that. That was somebody was particularly challenged about that, but that is just one person. Carers talked very positively about the fact that they get to the bigger picture, that some people have the opportunity, spoke about having the opportunity on the corporate parenting panel, about having representation on that, about how they felt that they were very much involved in the bigger strategic direction, that they felt that they had input into that. Things like we found out reviews were happening on time, 6 weekly visits were happening, people really appreciated that. And I mentioned about the contact coordinator post about that being very positive. Finally, as payment for skills we've talked about. In terms of training, I think is probably the last thing that I want to talk about. Again, it was mainly positive. There were some mixed responses to that. some people said that they felt that that the payment for skills, that in order to get that, they obviously had to do a particular training. Some of them felt that some of that training was very slow to happen, and that it meant that they had to wait longer to be, as they described it, approved or got the accreditation for the payment for skills, to have the higher rewards for that. And I think maybe that's something that the authority will want to look at. Good care review arrangements were in place with the independent reviewing officers. There were good examples of social workers where the recording was looked at. And I think that's it. That's really it in a very quick fly-through nutshell. As I said, overall positive. Still some things to do. The fact that there's somebody new in post, and again, as you said, Chair, in relation to the other inspection report, this happened in November, and I'm sure things have moved on since then. So that's all really that I want to comment.
Thank you, Anne. That was a very clear and concise report. And would you be happy to answer any questions
Yes,
if there are
absolutely.
any? Or has anybody got any questions? No? I'm going to ask... Oh, sorry, I can't see. Sorry, Councillor. Sorry, he was blocking your view. Councillor Blakeburn.
This probably isn't a question, but one of those famous observations that members tend to make. I found the report really useful, and your presentation. For me, in my job to scrutinise and ask questions and to look at areas that I should have concern over, what I found was very useful was that, one, you acknowledged with evidence where the service was doing well. So that's good. It's good for morale, for the users of the service as well as the staff. You demonstrated any progress we've made. So again, you kind of get the sense we're moving forward. But finally, you've also highlighted where we need to further improve. But you've not just highlighted that, you've actually given us examples, you've given us advice, concrete ways that we can move forward. So for me, there isn't any questions because it's absolutely all there. And for me, as scrutiny, I'll be looking now at this areas for improvement. Those are the questions we'll be asking. So thanks.
Lovely. Thank you. I will pass that on to the inspector who wrote the report.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Blakeburn has just done my conclusion, really, but I will repeat it. But prior to that, Councillor Burrows would like to have a word as a Cabinet Member for Social Services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for that report. Obviously, a positive report as far as the foster care is concerned. I was actually there at the FC for FC meeting when the inspector was there. And certainly the feedback I get from the foster carers through chairing the corporate parenting panel is there is a very good relationship between us. There is always issues relating to communication. No organisation gets perfect communication between absolutely everybody, but it's always good and proper that we have external scrutiny of us, but then we get that external scrutiny then is the perception of the individuals looking in, but we as individuals know the reality of exactly what it's like inside, and we're very good at reviewing and assessing, and I can assure you that the situation with the foster carers 6 months on is improving still. I'm still beside myself with anger at what I saw in the Free Press yesterday. I wish that the authors of those two reports, they actually slammed this wonderful report as anything but positive, and I dispute that completely. I wish those authors had been here today and actually listened to a reasoned position on both reports, because when we have inspectors in, clearly everyone will have their views on and interpretations of exactly what the facts are. We're a very welcoming authority when we're given information. We all like good news. We have to deal with bad news because it's the way we improve. That's how any organisation gets on and delivers better, when we're actually reminded in a constructive way what still needs to be done. So really, I just want to thank everyone for the great contributions today. We have got a very good children's service in place. We have people who are utterly safe in our care. There will be issues around risk management. We never know what tomorrow is going to bring. Goodness me, the media always show us that. But I'm still trying to come down a little bit off the ceiling after what I saw in the press yesterday. I really don't think I can labour it anymore, but I just want to thank all the contributions today. I think they're very valid, and we can all be proud of the service that we're all looking after. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Violet. And I reiterate, I'm very sad and disappointed that the press aren't here today. You know, after giving a one-sided point of view, they should have been here perhaps to listen to a lively debate on children's services. And thank you very much for presenting this clear and concise report, which highlighted improvements and areas that needed further improvement, which is perfectly understandable. But overall, it was a positive report offering constructive criticism, and we take that on board. Okay. So thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Are you going to stay? Oh, before you go, Tracy, would you like a word now? Before
I just wanted to advise members of scrutiny really around recommendation 10 on the first report that Bobby presented around scrutiny and how we can improve that for you all. I've been talking to Councillor Jones and Councillor Burrows about how we can improve that. So my proposal is that we would provide you with case studies, maybe 3 a year, and we would have staff from Children's Services here before you to explain how it works, what information we get coming in, when decisions are made, and have service managers, team manager, whoever is relevant to that case, so that you could get a bit of an overview of how it works on the front line, because obviously we can't have you going out there working on cases or observing cases. So we thought that would be a best way of having an anonymous case, but those workers that are relevant to that case being able to give some information to you. We also talked about the service improvement plan that I've put together, which isn't just about the inspection, but the wider work that we're doing in children's services. We were proposing that we bring that to you on a quarterly basis, so you can see the work that we're planning to do within any quarter and can question our progress or perhaps not our progress. And also, we also discussed whether it would be helpful for you as members of scrutiny to maybe have a focus group with children's services staff, maybe a few of you a few times, 2 or 3 times a year, just to have a sit down and talk to the staff to see how things are going from their perspective, and if over the time you've got particular questions that you've kind of wanted to ask of staff directly without having to go through me, or you're always more than welcome to come to Children's Services and make that clear, but maybe that would be another way that you could talk with staff who are we could get a group of staff together for a couple or 3 of you at any time really throughout the year, and then you could again ask those questions just so that you feel that you've got that better line of engagement really, and I just wanted to check whether that was okay with members.
Absolutely, thank you. I did bring that up beforehand. I did tell the committee, and it was received very positively. And I think you agree, don't you, Councillor Fonney?
I just wanted to say what excellent suggestions, which we will do our best to support. And the closer we can get to understanding, without getting in the way, the better, I think.
Thank you. Thank you both very much for attending today, and I'm sorry you've had to wait so long, but thank you. Okay. Right, our next item is... Mark, you can go. Yes. But thank you for attending anyway.
Helpful contribution as always.
Thank you, your research. Right, the next report is the Children's Services Development Report presented by Tracy, who needs no introduction at this stage, I think. The purpose of this report is to advise members of the developments in children's services and to update members on the significant budget issues and financial requirements of the service. So, Tracy, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to apologise for all the reading that I've given you with these reports. I do apologise that they are quite long, but I felt it important that I gave members really a clear overview of what we've been doing in children's services over the past sort of year, really. When I came into post, it was clear that the service that we had needed development alongside that inspection findings from April of last year. It was about how we could improve those services and what the needs were coming forward. What we did know was that the demand on the service was continuing to increase, not always obviously in numbers of referrals being made to the service, but in quite a lot of cases there was real complex abuse becoming known to us that had to have a different methodology and a different way of working to make sure we were responding promptly to those children. So this report really covers some of that information that we've talked about around how we have developed the service, and there's a note there under recommendations. The local authority has already increased our base budget by 900,000, but going on what we have spent this year on children who are in placements, that would leave us with a £300,000 deficit. So we would already be starting on the back foot for this coming year. Also, the council have been extremely supportive, and the senior leadership team have been very supportive as well around the demand coming in. We've had more cases than we have had social workers to support those families. So not to cause delay, the members of senior leadership team have always agreed when I've gone to them saying we need more staff. We've put agency workers in place, 4 of which we have in because of this increased demand. And we've had those in place for some time now. There is no evidence that demand is reducing. And so those workers have stayed with the authority. The work is being moved through. We've got evidence that work is being completed in court. I say it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but we have had reduced complaints from court. I haven't had to go to court for quite some time. We've done a lot of work around our processes to make sure that we've got the right people in the right place at the right time to get work done, but these 4 workers have stayed. There is always a challenge around having agency workers within the authority because they can go technically with a week's notice. That isn't helpful to children who have to build those attachments to their workers. So the other term 2.2 in the report, it's about having 4 workers for a period of at least 18 months, so that we're not having agency workers, but we're essentially asking to go outside of establishment for these 4 posts to then have those workers with us to see whether demand reduces. Alongside this, you'll have the business cases that Jill Cox, sat at the back of the room here, has provided to you, who has given some overview and some thought around how can we improve things. So, for example, a special guardianship order, which we've talked about quite a lot in Select, is where another family member, for example, or indeed a foster carer, can request an assessment under special guardianship to then be given an order from the court to have long-term care of that child. That is an option that is usually better for the child, obviously, because they are with their family members. The option then for staff within the local authorities, that child does not remain looked after, but that family may still need some support. So one of the proposals in this is around a special guardianship worker who will support those families where there is a special guardianship order in place. And so that work has been ongoing, and we've developed that, which is the business case element of what you've got in your report. Alongside that, what I want to make clear really is that the business cases, we're not saying we want all of these posts recruited to at once. For example, the therapy post would have no point being in place right at the beginning until we have more foster carers coming through, being assessed, having gone to panel. So there's a bit of a time frame and a timeline around that. So there's not full year costs this year around these posts. And a couple of one of the posts is a social worker post in the fostering team to do more generic fostering, because as we've identified with you before, a lot of the fostering service time is being taken up complying with court assessment requirements, which then leaves us with a deficit because we don't have the same amount of time available for us to do assessment of what we call generic carers, those foster carers who we assess to care for children as and when we require it within the organisation. But we're hoping to kind of front load that and get some more assessments done, but that post wouldn't be long term, the other post would be. I didn't have any particular other areas that I wanted to highlight. It was really a case of questions. Jill Cox and Debbie Davis from the service are with us today. If you have any particular questions, we're happy to take those. Is that okay?
Yes.
Could I ask you, Tracy, what do you want from us exactly, apart from obviously our support? Do you want us to endorse the recommendations or the proposals 1, 2 and 3? Or do you want us to go through the recommendations and say we support you, we endorse the commitment to increase financial services, you know, after a word with Councillor Burrows?
Just to endorse that that you agree the support is required within the service and we can go ahead.
And likewise opposed, etc.
Yes.
So based on the recommendations.
Based on the recommendations.
Okay, so that's fine. Any questions, anybody, apart from that? Councillor Farley.
In that vein then, the obvious question is, can we afford it? But the real question is, can we afford not to do it? And I think that's the more important one. And you make the case in all sorts of ways and from different angles. And that's why I think there's actually many good qualities in the arguments here. Because you're challenging us as councillors with a duty of care towards our staff, quite properly. You're reminding us that these services don't run on thin air. And we've already seen reports this morning that 1.5 staff down is mentioned in one of, and so on and so forth. I won't rehearse them all. So I would say to you, certainly as one member of this committee, if you're asking for my support for these recommendations, you have it, and you have it without any equivocation.
Councillor Farley. Councillor Blakeburn.
I just want to ask a few questions, just on the cost really. What is the staff and caseload ratio, and how do we in Monmouthshire compared with other authorities? And then I'm also looking at page 4 of 5.3, where we have in there the current unit cost of a looked after child is £35,597 pounds. And you've created a breakdown, but again, when you're looking at the unit cost in Monmouthshire, how does that compare with other authorities? So does that make sense? So it's the, how many cases per staff in Monmouthshire compared to other authorities, and the unit cost of a child, looked after child in Monmouthshire compared with other authorities?
No, it's okay. Around the caseload, I would say that Monmouthshire have worked very hard over the past 2 years really to look at what caseload should be. To say, as I have had to do in this report, that there's this many staff and this many cases, I've kind of put the caveat in that paragraph about it isn't just what the number is compared to how many workers it is. It's about the experience of that social worker, the complexities of the case, how many siblings there may be. I would say we're on a par with the rest of Wales and lower caseloads than in some parts of Wales, and we would like to see that continue because we've had a real focus over the last 12 months on engaging children. I often say to staff, as do the service managers, you can't engage a child unless you know the child, and the forms almost fill in themselves once you know that child more effectively. So by doing that engagement, that does take longer, but it does have much better outcomes for the child as much as the service as well. So I would say that what we're seeking to achieve is right for children and families in Monmouthshire to keep caseloads at a reasonable level. I would say we're probably slightly lower than other parts of Wales. And the leadership team are supportive of that view and that way forward. Around the question on unit cost compared to the rest of Wales, I don't have the immediate data. Do you have any knowledge on that, Jill?
No, I don't think I've got information about how that compares directly. I know back last year that our finance team did quite a lot of work to check out the comparable information, and that was at that time the comparable investment in children's services was lower in Monmouthshire. But in terms of the actual unit costs, I don't know that we've got that information.
I can reassure you that our unit costs are not above. They're below or at the Welsh average each time we look at them. And they do fluctuate based on the mix of them. But one of the important things to us was to understand that our unit cost was not above what you would expect, and we are assured of that. Yes.
And I would say the other thing just to note there is that some local authorities have taken a decision to make cuts across services, whereas actually Monmouthshire are very supportive and have not made that decision in children's services. So I think we may see a bit of a change. going forward across Wales, but we have to be mindful of actually you're supporting us to not make those sort of cross-the-board cuts. So it's going to give us a bit of a skewed picture, I think, going forward.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. My maths is at heart here. If you go to page 66, am I right in understanding the red column at the bottom of 979,000? That's a saving over 5 years, as it's in red?
Jill wrote the report, and I'll just ask her to comment.
I really think we need some explanation over the maths.
Okay. It is, we had lots of discussions about cost avoidance and cost savings. I think what's probably most useful to look at, because I'm not very good with tables and maths being a social worker, but if you look at at page 61, in the background general information, that brings together the total investment versus the total savings. So, and it should tally, you should be able to tally with that table. But you'll see that the saving, we are talking about quite significant figures. So the total investment cost of all 3 business cases over the 5 years is estimated to be 919,000, and that's broken down by each of those proposals. And the total net cost avoidance, cost savings for all 3 proposals is 1,025,000. Does that answer your question?
Can you just say to me that it's going to cost us £1 million to do this work over 5 years?
Yeah, that's the total investment, but the total cost avoidance and cost savings
I'm not sure
is
what
more
cost
than
avoidance
that.
is, actually. I mean, we either have
I
costs
think
or we don't.
It's about that if we don't spend the money, we would spend it anyway. We would spend it in other ways. So, for example, the biggest figures are around the placements of children in dependent fostering placements. So if we don't have the in-house resource, we have to spend the money on the independent placements. We can't close our doors and say we're not going to have any more looked after children in. If that child needs to be looked after, they need to be placed and accommodated. So our preference would always be that those children are placed in-house, and that's cheaper, as well as provides a better service for those young people and families.
Simon.
Quick comment, because I'm afraid we've slipped into jargon that's become common with us, cost avoidance. We talk a lot in adult social service about it as well. Essentially what we do is when we look ahead over the medium term and try to identify our costs and the pressures, cost avoidance is the difference between what would happen if we do nothing and what we think will happen if we do this. But it's not a saving, because with the way demand works, if you say to me, where's the 900k, I can't give it to you because we've spent it on, in many cases, increased demand coming through the system. But it's an attempt to estimate, if we do nothing, we put this money in external placements, so it's going to cost us X. By moving away from external placements, so we anticipate it will cost X minus 900 is really what we're saying.
So for us simple souls, it's £1 million over the next 5 years you're looking to spend, which you're estimating you're going to need. All I'm concerned is whether my friend over on the top there has got it in his budget.
Councillor Burrows, if we look at the recommendations on page 55, page 1 of this report, all right, I think we, as a Select, if you look at 2.1, it says that the Select endorses a commitment to increase financial resources to children's services to meet current demand requirements as detailed within this report. And then if you go to 2.3, it says, as noted, members have previously agreed to an increase of £900,000. Therefore, consideration needs to be given to addressing the shortfall of the current expenditure of £300,000 in relation to cost of placements. Now, what's the situation with you?
Thank you very much. Look, we are now in that really hard part of all this. We know about funding, and it's been coming, and it's here, and it's going to be with us for quite some time to come. The fact that this report is with Select today is actually not unfortunate. That's the wrong word to use. It is good that you have this report because we welcome your contributions. What should be the case in matters like this was that the senior leadership team and cabinet alone should be in a position at this moment to be able to express a view and contribute to it. It is purely the timing in this case that is a consequence of this report being prepared, the Easter holiday, and the timing of this meeting, given the fact you don't meet now, I guess, until probably the back end of May or something, that today was the right time to bring this to you because it is time sensitive. It's very, very important to share with you what the views are and to get your contribution to it. But we're not in a position, I'm certainly not in a position to say, yes, Peter, I've got the money in my pocket and we're ready to go, because we haven't. One thing I can share with you, which you've heard before, is that we as a cabinet are one when we talk about the priorities of this council and where the priorities of vulnerable children fit into that. There are no priorities that this council have that are more important than vulnerable children, and I stand by that and will continue to do that. We're going to have some hard conversations about how we provide this funding, but fund it we will have to, because it is the right thing to do. I've been spending a lot of time with Tracy over this last 12 months since she came in post permanently, talking endlessly about how we reprofile children's services and what can be done to actually get it to fit like a jigsaw far better than it was doing at the time. A lot of good work is being done, not quite the effectiveness that we wanted, but certainly things like this now, getting a coordinator in place, a social worker coordinator that's going to thoroughly understand and work with foster carers and work with potentially people who want to become special guardians. These are people who will be family members, extended family members of those families who've got difficulties with their children, so that child can be placed with the family rather than a foster carer. It means they're not on the register. It means that we don't have to have ongoing social services input and resource cost. That's a great outcome for the child because it's with the family. It's a great outcome for us because we know that there won't be the placement movements and the cost and the trauma that those youngsters have to put in. Now, having somebody there paid by us to actually start working in these areas gets us facing in the right direction for the demand that's inevitably continuing to come at us. So whilst I haven't got the money in my pocket just now, Peter, there will be an end point to this where we will be providing the best we can, the kind of needs that Tracy is expressing that we need in order to continue to make our children's services even more fit for purpose than it is already.
Thank you, Jeff. That's very helpful. Tracy, would you like to come back?
I just want to also advise Select that we're not just coming here today and saying this is what we want to do. Alongside, we have to still run a statutory service. We have to still provide services to children that come to our door, are in need or at risk. But we're also working with the JAF-TAF area of the council, which is the prevention work, to make sure that those prevention services that are available, for example, my 3 highest referral reasons, as I've noted in the report, are domestic abuse and drug and alcohol. So we are then now looking, are our prevention services targeted in the right way? Are we using those resources in prevention to stop those children escalating into children's services? So it's not just we're just doing this and this is the answer. What we need to be doing is making sure everything is being done to make sure those children and young people don't escalate to children's services. Once they come to children's services, there's only really 2 options, and you can't prevent at that point. They are either a child in need and you can move that down, the child protection and the family have to improve within quite short timescales, or we remove that child and the child then goes through, that case goes through a court process and that child lives long term away. But we need to make sure we're doing as much as we can to prevent, as well as in the meantime making sure we're delivering as effective service as we can. Is that okay?
Thank you, Tracy. That's very clear. Simon, you want a word?
Yes, could I just clarify the status of this report that you've got in front of you, and it links to what Jeff said, really. We felt, this is one of the biggest, most significant reports probably coming into the council over the next few months, and so we felt it was important to get it to yourselves, even though it wasn't fully in line with the process. But already, since this went to press and came to you, we've done some more work on the recommendations. So, for example, these recommendations will not look like this. The recommendations that Cabinet will be receiving will be more specific about exactly how the funding is provided and so forth. Have a copy of those? That will, yes. I've got to agree with Jeff. I was finalising it last night, and we will soon have that ready to go out for consultation. So that will be coming forward at that point. So it's a bit how you put it in the right order, but
chicken or the egg.
didn't want you to worry too much. These recommendations don't have the clarity that the final ones will once Jeff and his colleagues decided how this is managed.
So what do you think? Would you like us to overall support it and endorse them as they stand, and perhaps it will return to scrutiny at some further point?
That would be most helpful if we had a
Okay.
view of scrutiny on what's proposed here,
Yes.
and then it's back to the executive to decide
Yes.
how and when they make
And
this
perhaps we'll
happen.
back that up with a draft letter to Cabinet members, Councillor Burrows. Yes, Debbie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm keen to say yes to it, definitely in principle. I do have concern financially because you're asking other departments to make cuts in social services who also work with vulnerable, additional learning needs, they're being cut. And it's balancing where we're putting more money into there, but we're taking it from there. So it's just to be mindful of that. However, you're absolutely right. You know, when you're looking at a team, in order to have good quality services to safeguard those children, we are probably having to invest. And actually, it does sound as if what you're saying is by investing this money in the long term, we'll be saving some money, which is also a good strategy.
Yes, so if everybody's finished, have they? Anybody else got another question? Anybody else? I think, well, thank you, Tracy, you and your staff once again for all the hard work and commitment and for everything you do. And I think we'll just say to you that instead of, well, we'll take the recommendations as they stand at the moment, as we receive them, and we support and endorse them as a whole. Do you agree, committee? Yes. So you can go away with that behind you, but we will also, I think, follow this up with a letter to Cabinet members. All right, Phil Murphy and Councillor Burrows. All right, is that all right with you? Okay, thank you very much for your report. It was clear and concise and interesting. Thank you. Hazel will now explain why we're not doing finance, but I did have a word with them when you were out beforehand in the pre-meeting.
I'm very sorry, it's an oversight on my part that the finance report is on today's agenda. It might look familiar to you. You saw it at your last meeting, you scrutinised it at the last meeting, so it's on the agenda today as an oversight, but you can just take it for information. If you have any questions, please direct them to Mark Howcroft.
And the item after that is work-based planner, but do we do that now as we're the last?
Yes.
We still go ahead with it even though the committee may change. All right. So we'll look at the...
Just to advise members very quickly that on your work programme, your next meeting is the 21st of May. And you agreed some time ago that you'd have the youth service to come to that meeting. So Tracy Thomas will be leading on a sort of overview of the service, performance update to date. She'll be talking to you about income generating projects. She'll also present to you the MCC NEAT strategy, and she'll include European Social Fund monies for pre and post 16 support, intervention and employment opportunities. Also, we'll have Gwent Music Service at that meeting. Those two items were discussed together at a previous meeting. You might recall the budget mandate. So we agreed that they'd come back in May. So that will be then. Simon's annual report is on that meeting, but we actually took that to Adult Select yesterday, and we invited CYP members along for that. So some of you will have already scrutinised that, others won't. If you would like it to remain on the agenda, then we will still ask Simon to come, but before the 21st of May, it will actually be going to full council, so you'll get a chance to discuss it there as well. So that is up to you whether you...
Can I just say at this point, I think we can take it off because some of us went to that meeting, so we have it, but it's going to full council, so everyone will have it. So it seems pointless to come back.
Okay.
You agree?
I agree.
That's fine. Your work programme ahead has got items in it, but some of them need to be confirmed and possibly moved around. So I think as far as today stands, we'll just talk about the 21st of May. Are you happy with that? The Cabinet Work Planner, I've had a look through. I can't see anything pertinent that relates to your committee that you might consider that you want to be brought forward to scrutiny. You may have views otherwise. So if you want to give me your view on the planner as it stands.
Can I just say, can we follow up what we said this morning about what was it? I've gone completely blank. Tracy's suggestion, yes, that's right, yeah, yes, it was.
With regards to Tracy's suggestions about how we can improve the scrutiny and the sort of relationship, I guess, that's held with the inspectors and us, suggestions around visits, workshops, myself and the chair will sit down and look to see how we can incorporate that into the work programme. That will feature as what's been agreed this year, despite the fact that the new committee might decide a new work programme. We've agreed it up to this point, still in this year of administration, so it will feature in the ongoing work programme.
Councillor Clark.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm sitting here a little uneasy that you're going to write to the Cabinet endorsing what we've just heard. Can we change that so that we have noted it? Yes. I don't think endorse it's too strong a term. We're not in that position.
Yeah. All right, that's fine.
We noted.
Yes,
we watch this space with interest.
But may I say, I would send the letter to you anyway prior to that for it to be checked. So, you know, I won't just send it.
Right,
Is that all right, everybody?
Yeah,
Noted. Okay. Thank you.
Can I make a couple of points about the next committee of the work programme or whatever? Firstly, I mean, we touched on it this morning. We mustn't forget, I think, that we haven't yet found a way of following up the beginnings of our engagement with individual schools. I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but we need to resolve that, I would suggest. And with that in mind, and the formation of the next committee, which may or may not be similar to this one, it's beginning to feel like nearly said a life sentence, a life's work, Peter. But in all seriousness, I've asked this before. It isn't necessarily for us here to resolve it, but I am aware that there should be, as I understand it, a head teacher member who has been identified by, is it the Monmouthshire Association of Head Teachers? And that I understood to be currently the head at the Dell, Stephen King. But I never see his name on the papers. He never is able to say to me he's been invited because he hasn't been. And I've asked about this. I've asked through the committee clerking system, not present company, and I've also asked the residual governing support here. So I really would like to see this resolved, actually.
Hazel.
We've checked it out, and that person is not does not have a seat on this committee. So there's obviously a misunderstanding there. But looking at the co-opted members and who attends and perhaps some vacancies on the committee, I do think it's timely that perhaps we look at who sits on as co-optees and maybe who can come off. Some obviously are statutory, some are not. But in terms of this particular individual, I think you need to bear in mind that there is a level of appropriateness for consideration when thinking about who should be on a select committee. We've been advised this morning that we ought to be calling in head teachers again, which we're going to have to do before the autumn. So we'll probably be looking to do that before they take their 6 weeks break. If you've got head teachers or even a representative of a head teacher association on the committee, it presents a potential conflict of interest. And also, if you have too many co-opted people on the committee, some members feel that this undermines the democratic role. So I think there needs to be a bit of reflection around who should sit on the committee, and perhaps we need to do some work on this. I can draw up a list of who is on there, any vacancies, and perhaps we can have a look at that when the new committee meets.
Interestingly, I was approached at a governor's meeting to say, oh, I'm going to join your committee. And I said, oh, really? Are you? Yes, I've put my application in and I'm going to join it. So I was rather dumbfounded by this. So it would be interesting to go through the procedure as it should be, I think. Just one other thing before, well, two other things. First of all, that was the thing I was trying to remember. It was the head teachers that we must see. So I think in a July meeting, we must see them prior to Estin coming back in September, October, because they want us to see that we've carried through that.
All of them?
Well, we saw 4 last time.
I was say there are 40 of them.
No, the secondary schools. And then can I just finish? Hazel got a point to make about the word noted.
Basically, your recommendations are asking you to endorse, and you sat there and said that you agreed in principle with them. The problem with noting is that it just means that you accepted them as read, but it doesn't mean that you gave support to them. So you might want to consider whether you're all agreed on that, because if the chair is going to write to the cabinet member, it needs to be clear whether you're supporting those recommendations or not. If you want to say that you support the recommendations, you feel that the cabinet member needs to find the funds as appropriate, but obviously you're not stipulating from where, then that's okay. But I think you need to be careful with the noting. I'm sorry.
Couldn't you support them as they are? Because he did say that there might well be
That there are changes. I think the word support is quite good. We did.
Principle, but we can't. We're not in that position.
No, but we can support the recommendations. We can support that. We are in that position. Yes.
I think in principle, bearing in mind finances,
Not our
where
remit.
is it coming from?
You either support or you don't support. It's not our job to find the money,
Exactly.
which is Peter's point,
Yeah.
I think. But it is our job to say this is something which is important, and I think that's what you're
Yeah, it's the
recognising.
money bit I was
Absolutely. But if anybody wants any help in finding things that could be dropped in favour of this, I would be glad to help.
Yeah, he gets paid for that.
Yes.
And
Do you
bloody
want to say it again?
usually anyway.
So are you all supporting? No, are you
In
all?
principle we are.
Are you all supporting in principle? Supporting in principle? Yes.
Sorry to labour the point, but it's just that obviously Estin have commented that sometimes we're not clear enough in how we follow up. So it is important that we actually specify what we
about
want.
clarity, you know.
We can just. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all once again for coming today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Chairman.
And for all your support
Thank you for
during the
doing
last
very well
hour
this morning.
and the commitment. And thank you to Hazel, and thank you to Sarah as well, and to my vice chair, Peter. So thank you all, and
Can we just,
next term maybe, I
yeah,
don't know.
can we just thank you, because very few chairmen are as clear about their subject as you are, and it's a delight to have you in front of us. Well done.
Very good. Thank you. I hope it continues.
We have our way.
Yes. There we are.